Hi, and welcome back to another episode of College Debt. Let's go. Today's video is going to be a simple one, but it's something I wanted to talk about since it's a topic that often goes under the radar for how subtle it is. But when it's realized, it can be a very interesting way of framing intimate interactions or character dynamics when you use a tool as simple as a dividing line. One of the great things about filmmaking is that more often than not, what seems to be less is a lot more than meets the eye.
I said, you don't want to move. I mean, why move the camera? That's the most exciting thing you can watch, is that performance there. You don't want to get between the audience and that performance. And I think we tend to forget how powerful imagery can be in that way, you know, how it can be used to bring more to the table than, you know, there's some of the parts, you know.
The dividing line adds to the visual storytelling by establishing within the frame one character's feelings over the other in a two-shot dynamic. But how you use this dynamic is up to you. So let's explore two examples today: Baby Blue by Shinichiro Watanabe and Kaiba by Masaki Yuasa. So let's begin by jumping into Baby Blue. Baby Blue is a story of friendship that takes place over three parts: union, separation, and conclusion. With that established, our union story begins like this, with two characters on the side of the frame. It seemed like a simple idea when you pick it off from a single shot, but this method of framing is more than just having two people talk. The key thing to get here is that dynamics change over time. So now the question is, how do you show this evolving dynamic visually over three parts of the story? The first thing to consider is that since Sho and Hatsuki hold equal significance to the story, stage them both at the same depth. The second thing to consider is understanding their placement laterally relative to the vertical center of the frame. When Sho and Hatsuki begin to bond, they're on the same side of the frame. But when Sho mentions something that separates them, they're split left and right. But now we have to consider how each shot is going to complement the next, so that we can transition from a static dynamic to a changing dynamic. You'll see why the rules for a two-shot dynamic are so simple, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to emphasize the awkwardness between one character who looks over to the other side, seeing someone who's not following his eye line, and then seeing the strap hanger split them in half. Or you wouldn't be able to show the subtle transition within the same shot as Hatsuki crosses the street sign to put them both on the same side of the frame. This is why boxing your characters with the environment is such a key feature of the two-shot dynamic. It's also one of the recurring visual themes in Gridman, where it's mainly used for character disconnect.
悪いけど、響くんと同じクラスになって初めてこんなに喋った感じだよ。そうっすか。But with a bit of creativity, you can draw your dynamic from power lines or windows to show both character connect and disconnect. You'll see this effect in practically every shot in this short. It brings the focus not on the individual, because there's always two of them, but because there's always two of them, the world is simply defined by whether the characters share commonality in space, or whether they hold differences in space. Andrei Tarkovsky once said about filmmaking that art must transcend as well as observe, and Watanabe shows that even the simplest ideas can bring a lot more to the existing visual grammar. Even if these lines are subtle, I think it effectively underscores an important theme about relationships, that actions speak louder than words. But this style isn't limited to intimate drama. There's an opposite style of the split dynamic that's even more subtle. It uses no environment, no physical lines, just the imagination all in a single scene. It's one of the things that Masaki Yuasa is not really known for: cinematic subtlety. As two-shot dynamics can be a part of general storytelling, they can also be a part of scene development. To see this in action, let's jump ship to Kaiba and prepare for a dance. So here it is. Like before, it seems to be a very simple composition. There's an old lady sitting in the center of the foreground, and there are three doors centered and equally spaced in the background. This is the first time in this video where we've seen a dynamic presented as above and below. So let's dance. It begins with this cut-in where the orientation is switched. While our main subjects are still in the shot, this dynamic is now split left and right. It continues with this cut-in where the direction has changed. Our main subjects are still in the shot, but this dynamic is now right to left. The sequence then wraps up. See how this dynamic is now above and below. This goes on for a little bit, but once the shot cuts one last time, the empty spaces from the left, right, and top are now filled by these figments. And this is why the whole scene is so interesting. If we think in terms of the story, there are no physical lines in the first shot to underscore anything, so our introduction to the scene is completely ambiguous. But as these cuts reveal the positioning of these characters, and as these imitations block right,
left, and top, we see this composition again. But with these limitations now staged where they are, you finish your dance by trapping your character to the bottom. No matter how big or small the story is, it goes to show that even the simplest ideas can give directors a lot more room to play around with the visual poetry. But it's distressingly rare to find modern directors who consider the composition beyond the looks. Instead of pulling up random close-ups and convenient cuts, you just place the camera down, unmoving, and observe the relationship. And I think this is what's missing from a lot of modern Japanese animation. Observation. Most of what's going on in here is sometimes so subtle that you might ask yourself, why even bother? But it's the visual observation that gives meaning beyond the words. There are so many ways to play around with character dynamics, but I decided to share Baby Blue and Kaiba today because they are great examples that build on beautifully to the existing visual grammar. And it goes to show that even the simplest of visual details can display Sho and Hatsuki's friendship one last time, only to emphasize their growing distance between the glass and reflection. Even if animation gives us the ability to dream of anything, it's still a part of filmmaking. And I think we should remember that for all the small details that exist in this world, they all live together as part of a big picture. So there we have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this short video. Thanks for watching.